Amidst the vibrant energy of a bustling college town, the life of a young student named Samantha Lee Josephson took a grim and tragic turn. Her story captivated a nation, shedding light on the potential dangers that can lurk within the seemingly ordinary moments of our lives. Samantha, a spirited and ambitious young woman, radiated positivity on the University of South Carolina campus. Yet, little did anyone anticipate that a routine night out would spiral into a series of events that would devastate those who knew her. Born to Seymour and Marcy Josephson in Princeton, New Jersey, Samantha grew up in Robbinsville, New Jersey. As a child, she attended the University of South Carolina, where she pursued a degree in political science. At the time of her untimely demise, Samantha, a senior in college, had plans to graduate in 2019 and continue her studies at Drexel University School of Law, aspiring to specialize in international law. She had earned a full scholarship to Drexel University and a partial scholarship to Rutgers. A member of the Alpha Gamma Delta sorority, Samantha also seized opportunities to broaden her horizons by studying abroad in Barcelona and exploring Madrid and Paris during her time in South Carolina. Described as remarkably beautiful, Samantha possessed a captivating smile that illuminated the lives of those around her. She was also romantically involved with a young man named Greg. The couple shared a deep bond, staying connected every day through constant texting and calling. They envisioned a future together, with plans for Greg to move in with Samantha and support her as she pursued law school. Everything seemed promising until the evening of Friday, March 29, 2019, when Samantha failed to return to her apartment, signaling a troubling turn of events. On the preceding evening of March 28th, Samantha intended to join her roommate and friends for a night out in Columbia, South Carolina. Although her boyfriend Greg couldn't be with them as he was in his hometown, he encouraged her to enjoy herself. Samantha, feeling somber due to news of a family member's illness, sought distraction and companionship with her friends, seeing the outing as an opportunity to uplift her spirits. The group explored various bars before settling at the Bird Dog Bar in the lively area of 5 Points, a popular hangout for students. Despite having a good time, Samantha kept in touch with Greg, expressing her longing for his presence and emotional support. Although they had plans to reunite the following weekend, Greg chose to stay put, maintaining constant communication with her. Around 2 a.m., Samantha decided to return to her apartment alone and ordered an Uber, a common practice among her peers. Little did she know, this decision would lead her into the hands of a murderer as she awaited her ride. At approximately 2:04 a.m., Samantha had her final phone conversation with Greg. She informed him of her departure, stating she was on her way home and had hailed an Uber, a routine she had practiced numerous times before to navigate the distance between the bars and her residence. A few minutes after summoning the Uber, a vehicle approached the curb where Samantha and other patrons awaited their rides. Surveillance cameras captured her approaching the car, only to realize it was meant for someone else. Correcting her course, she returned to her position on the sidewalk. Samantha, dressed in an orange shirt and black pants, continued to wait. Soon after, a black Chevrolet Impala driven by Nathaniel David Rowland arrived at the spot in front of her. Assuming it was her ride, Samantha bid farewell to Greg and approached the vehicle. After a brief exchange with the driver, she entered the back seat, unaware of the danger that awaited her. As soon as Samantha entered the car, it swiftly accelerated away. Moments later, the Uber she had originally requested arrived at the designated pickup spot. However, unable to locate Samantha, the driver canceled the request and departed. From that moment onward, only Samantha and the driver of the Impala were aware of the mistaken entry. Later CCTV footage revealed the black Chevrolet Impala circling the area several times before focusing on Samantha. Familiar with the routine of college students gathering in 5 Points after bar closures, observers grew suspicious of the driver's actions, suggesting a deliberate intent. Meanwhile, Samantha's attentive boyfriend, Greg, monitored her journey via the Find My Friends app to ensure her safety. He became concerned when he noticed her heading in the opposite direction of her apartment. Initially dismissing it as a detour to a friend's house, Greg texted her to confirm her well-being. However, he received no response. Concerned, He attempted to call her, but Samantha did not answer her phone. Greg persisted, repeatedly texting Samantha until he noticed that his messages showed as delivered but not read, indicating that Samantha hadn't read any of his texts. This unusual behavior, coupled with Samantha's phone ceasing to share its location, deeply unsettled Greg, as such occurrences had never happened before. Despite considering the possibility that Samantha had misplaced her phone in the Uber, Greg reached out to her friends and roommate to inquire about her whereabouts, or if she had safely reached home. Regrettably, no one had heard from or seen Samantha. Hoping for her return by morning, Greg attempted to rest. However, when Samantha failed to appear, her roommates grew increasingly worried and reported her missing. Greg, deeply concerned, drove 2 hours to Columbia to aid in the search. Within 3 to 4 hours of filing the missing person report, turkey hunters stumbled upon the lifeless body of a young woman, later identified as Samantha Josephson, in a wooded area in New Zion, approximately 65 miles away from 5 Points. Dismayed by the grim discovery, the hunters promptly contacted 911, prompting swift response from local law enforcement. Following an autopsy, it became evident that Samantha had been subjected to a brutal and violent attack. Her body bore over 120 separate stab wounds, with injuries spanning her face, head, neck, hands, upper body, legs, and feet, painting a harrowing picture of the horrific ordeal she endured. It was determined that Samantha had attempted to defend herself as her fingernails were found mutilated, likely a result of her efforts to shield herself from a sharp, double-bladed knife. The autopsy revealed a severe loss of blood, with Samantha's body containing only 20 millimoles compared to the average human's 4 liters. Further investigation unveiled surveillance footage from the bar that night, capturing Samantha entering a black Chevrolet Impala. The car's repeated circling suggested premeditation, as if the driver was scouting for a victim. Investigators discovered that Samantha mistakenly entered the killer's car, believing it to be her Uber. The actual Uber arrived shortly afterward, indicating that Samantha's assailant was likely not the driver of the Impala. It was theorized that the killer may have employed child-proof locks to trap Samantha inside, preventing her escape. With this information, investigators swiftly released descriptions of the car to the public in hopes of identifying the perpetrator. Just before he could strike again, officers on routine patrol spotted the black Chevrolet Impala cruising the very same area where Samantha was kidnapped. At 3:00 a.m. on March 30th, they pulled the car over, prompting the driver to flee. After a brief chase, officers apprehended the suspect, identified as Nathaniel Rowland, a 24-year-old resident of New Zion. Upon inspecting the vehicle, officers found a child's car seat in the back, surrounded by what appeared to be bloodstains, prompting them to call for backup. Homicide detectives took charge, thoroughly searching the car and discovering profuse amounts of blood on the passenger seat, in the trunk, and a bloody footprint on a rear window. Samantha's cell phone was also found on the floorboards, revealing Rowland's attempt to sell it at a pawn shop earlier that day. The presence of activated child locks confirmed suspicions that Rowland had trapped Samantha in his car. Additionally, various cleaning products were discovered, suggesting an attempt to conceal evidence, though traces of blood remained, indicating an incomplete cleanup. During interrogation, Rowland adamantly denied any involvement in Samantha's kidnapping and murder, despite mounting evidence against him. Despite the mounting evidence against him, Josephson maintained his innocence in the face of accusations. A physical examination of Rowland following his arrest revealed traces of Samantha's DNA under his fingernails, a perplexing discovery considering her genetic markers were present in him. However, none of Rowland's DNA was found on Samantha's body, a highly unusual circumstance. Detectives, piecing together the grim details of Samantha's final moments, speculated that she fell victim to a blitz attack. The presence of child-proof locks in the car at the time of Rowland's arrest led investigators to conclude that he activated this feature as soon as Samantha entered the vehicle, rendering her unable to escape. Helpless, Samantha believed she was in the care of her Uber driver, unaware of the impending danger. As Roland ferociously attacked her with a double-bladed knife, Samantha struggled to defend herself, resulting in multiple stab wounds to her hands and mangled fingernails. The excessive force inflicted upon her painted a grim picture of the relentless assault she endured. It's understandable that Samantha was unable to scratch her attacker, which would have potentially left his skin cells under her nails. After committing the dreadful act, Roland drove to a farmer's access road in New Zion, a location known only to locals, where he callously dumped Samantha's body in the nearby woods. Upon returning home, Roland brazenly resumed his normal activities, spending much of the day posting on social media as if nothing had occurred. His residence, situated mere minutes away from where Samantha's remains were discovered, provided further incriminating evidence against him. A deeper dive into Roland's background revealed him to be a devout churchgoer who had briefly attended South Carolina State University in 2017, although his graduation status and employment history remained unclear. Roland had a prior felony arrest from October 2018 for obtaining a signature or property under false pretenses. Additionally, there were allegations of him being involved in a carjacking incident with another individual. A woman was carjacked by two men, one of whom was Roland, who assaulted her and coerced her to drive to an ATM to withdraw money. They then forced her to return home, where they further robbed her of belongings, including a PlayStation 4. Despite Roland not being convicted of this crime, he was found to have sold some of the stolen items, including the PlayStation 4. Upon obtaining a search warrant for Roland's girlfriend's apartment in New Zion, named Maria Howard, detectives discovered incriminating evidence in the trash bins. Among the items found were a sock and bandana allegedly belonging to Roland, heavily stained with Samantha's blood. Additionally, they found a white sheet with blood, a roll of duct tape, bleach wipes with blood, and a two-bladed knife with apparent blood stains. Subsequent tests confirmed that the blood found on these items matched Samantha Josephson's. With the evidence mounting rapidly against him, Roland was initially charged with possessing a weapon during a violent crime, as well as the kidnapping and murder of Samantha Josephson. The trial proved arduous for the family, with Roland pleading not guilty, asserting his innocence despite the substantial evidence against him. During the trial, which commenced in the summer of 2021, Roland's defense team argued that his DNA was not found on the victim, attempting to paint him as an innocent man. However, prosecutors countered this defense with the overwhelming evidence collected in the case, refuting Roland's claims of innocence. The evidence presented included CCTV footage depicting Roland's car picking up Samantha in 5 points and driving away, the discovery of Samantha's blood in his car, her bloody footprint on the vehicle's back window, allegations of attempted use of her bank card at an ATM after disposing of her body, and cell phone trackers indicating their devices were in the same location at the time of the murder. Furthermore, Roland lived in close proximity to where Samantha's remains were found. A handwriting expert was consulted to analyze a list found in Roland's home, which included items like duct tape, gloves, a black flip phone, gasoline, and matches. The expert testified that it was likely Roland wrote the list, indicating premeditation. Prosecutors called 31 witnesses to testify, including an individual who witnessed Roland cleaning the murder weapon, the pawn shop owner to whom he attempted to sell Samantha's cell phone, and his ex-girlfriend, who claimed her daughter had blood on her shoe after being in Roland's car following the murder. Despite the mounting evidence, Roland opted not to call any witnesses, and none of his family members testified on his behalf. He maintained his innocence and pleaded with the judge. However, it took the jury only an hour to reach a guilty verdict. Following Nathaniel Roland's conviction, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In response to Samantha's tragic murder, her parents, Seymour and Marcy Josephson, took action to prevent similar tragedies. They established the What's My Name Foundation, advocating for safety measures in rideshare services. The foundation encourages people to ask the driver to confirm their name before entering the vehicle, promoting a safety protocol called SAMI, which stands for Stop, Ask, Match, and Inform. In the aftermath of Samantha's death, The rideshare industry also implemented additional safety measures, such as issuing personalized 4-digit codes to confirm the correct vehicle. Samantha's passing deeply impacted her family and friends, leaving an indelible mark of grief. Her story serves as a poignant reminder of the unpredictability of tragedy. May Samantha Lee Josephson's memory inspire us to remain vigilant, prioritize the safety of others, and strive towards a world characterized by compassion and security. In 2012, at the Summer Olympics in London, a young Puerto Rican boxer named Felix Verdejo Sanchez emerged as a star. Dubbed the Diamond, he was one of the most promising athletes in his country, expected to win titles and gold medals. It seemed to everyone that this talented and motivated young man would reach incredible heights in the sport. However, in 2021, Felix's name resurfaced in the global media, not for his boxing prowess, but for a criminal scandal. This story recounts how a teenage attachment evolved into a tragic addiction, leading to a horrendous crime. It also details how Felix, once lauded and promoted by two-time Olympic champion Vasyl Lomachenko as the author of the May knockout of 2014, narrowly escaped the death sentence but was ultimately sentenced to life in prison. Remarkably, despite irrefutable evidence and the confession of an accomplice, Felix continues to plead not guilty to this day. Felix's journey began in San Juan, Puerto Rico, where he was born on May 19, 1993. He grew up in a modest, large family and initially aspired to be a baseball player. His path changed due to a serendipitous event at age 9. During a visit from a family friend and his son, Felix got into a fight. The incident prompted his father to suggest that if Felix wanted to fight, he should do so in a boxing ring. Felix was taken to a local gym, and from his first training session, he fell in love with boxing. At 16, he won the Pan American Junior Championships. The following year, he became his country's champion and soon after competed in the London Olympics, reaching the quarterfinals. His professional career started that same year, during which he had 29 fights, winning 27 convincingly. In 2014, he was recognized for delivering the best knockout in a fight against Sergio Villanueva. A year later, Felix won his first championship belt, the WBO Latino title, which he defended 6 times over 2 years. Spectators believed he was destined to make history in the boxing world. Meanwhile, Tayala Rodriguez, born in November 1993 in San Juan, Puerto Rico, had her own story. Her full name was Kayla Marlene Rodriguez Ortiz. Her parents, Jos and Kayla Rodriguez, had another daughter, Bars Nicole, and they also raised Jonathan, Kayla's son from a previous marriage. Kayla grew up as an open and sociable girl, excelling in school and dreaming of becoming a veterinarian due to her love for animals. Her best friend was her sister Bears, to whom she confided all her secrets. This narrative intertwines the rise and fall of Felix Verdejo with the life of Kayla Rodriguez, painting a picture of promise, talent, and ultimately tragedy. Kayla attended the same school as Felix Verdejo, who was her age. The two had known each other since childhood, and their acquaintance blossomed into a romantic relationship during adolescence. In 2011, Kayla's parents divorced and separated, with Kayla moving to Florida to live with relatives. The daughters, now adults, chose to stay in San Juan. Despite leading separate lives, the sisters remained in close contact, sharing everything about their experiences. At 18, Felix, a promising boxer who had already competed in the Olympics, began a relationship with a young schoolgirl and aspiring model, Eliza Maria Santiago Sierra. At the time, Eliza was only 14 and still in school, but she had big plans for her future with the world-famous athlete. Eliza's parents approved of the relationship, and Felix, who was always surrounded by fans and female admirers, did not miss the opportunity for fleeting romances. Despite his serious relationship with Eliza,
Felix continued to see his childhood friend, Kayla. Kayla's sister, Bears, and her mother, Kayla Rodriguez, were aware of the affair and did not approve of it. The situation was complicated. Eliza considered herself Felix's only love and was preparing for their wedding, while TLA, despite knowing about Eliza,
still hoped Felix would choose her. In 2016, Felix married Eliza, who was then 19. By that time, Eliza was a well-known model with a significant social media following and had opened her own beauty studio for eyelash extensions. Just months after the wedding, Felix was involved in a serious motorcycle accident, sustaining head injuries, bruises, and lacerations. His trainer, Ricky Marquez, feared for Felix's career, but Felix made a rapid recovery and soon returned to the ring. In September 2019, Felix posted a picture on social media with Eliza, who was heavily pregnant, announcing that he would soon meet his daddy's princess. A month later, he announced the birth of their daughter, Miranda Verdejo Santiago. Publicly, Felix appeared to be a loving husband and father, but he continued his secret relationship with KLA. Eliza later admitted she suspected her husband of infidelity, but each time Felix swore he would leave his mistress. TLA repeatedly tried to end the relationship, but Felix wouldn't let her go, even threatening her if she saw other men. Despite everything, TLA, who had fallen in love with Felix in high school, continued to love him. TLA pursued her passion for animals, working at a veterinary medicine and aesthetics center. Her colleagues described her as conscientious, hardworking, and very responsible. She lived with 2 dogs and a cat, whom she adored. Eliza discovered her husband's correspondence with several mistresses, including TLA. Furious, she confronted Felix, threw him out of the house, and threatened to file for divorce and prevent him from seeing their daughter. These threats had an impact, especially as Felix's career was already in decline, and he didn't need additional problems. For a while, he stopped seeing Rodriguez, but he still tried to control her every move. After a few months, Felix resumed secret visits with KLA. In April 2021, KLA discovered she was pregnant. She bought a pregnancy test, which confirmed her fears. Her first call was to her sister, who knew about her complicated relationship with Felix. KLA, 27 at the time, was determined to keep the baby and raise it on her own if necessary. A few days later, she broke the news to Felix, hoping he would accept it. Instead, he was furious and demanded she have an abortion. TLA firmly refused, but Felix continued to threaten her, insisting that an illegitimate child would ruin his reputation. After TLA's hospital visit confirmed her pregnancy, she obtained a certificate as proof. When she informed Felix, he became even more enraged and demanded she terminate the pregnancy. KLA again refused. Trying another tactic, Felix claimed he didn't believe her and wanted to see the medical certificate himself. He arranged to meet KLA in a public place on the evening of April 29th, a strategy they often used to avoid drawing attention. A few days before the meeting, Felix visited his old friend Luis Antonio, who worked at a local machine shop and had criminal connections, including involvement in the illegal drug trade. Felix outlined his predicament and asked for Luis's help in getting rid of his pregnant mistress. Luis, previously on the police's radar, was hesitant, but Felix was persistent. He'd assured Luis that everything would go smoothly and promised a substantial cash reward. Luis reluctantly agreed. With Luis's support, Felix called KLA, telling her he wanted to meet on April 29th to confirm her pregnancy and decide the next steps. After speaking with Felix, KLA called her sister again, still hoping Felix would accept her child and not insist on an abortion. However, Bears was alarmed by the situation. She knew Felix had threatened her sister and feared he might harm her. Bears called their mother to share her concerns, but together they couldn't dispel the growing unease about what Felix might do. They could not dissuade KLA from attending the fateful meeting. At the appointed time, Rodriguez, carrying her doctor's note, arrived in her Kia Ford. Felix arrived in his pickup truck with Luis hidden in the back. KLA got into Felix's car and showed him the test results. Felix once again urged her to terminate the pregnancy, but KLA, in tears, refused. Their conversation escalated into a violent quarrel, ending with Felix striking KLA in the head, rendering her unconscious. While KLA was unconscious, Felix retrieved the syringe filled with illegal substances supplied by Lewis and hidden in the glove compartment and injected her. Together, they moved KLA to the back of the truck, where they had prepared pieces of wire and a concrete block. They tied her up, attached the block, and covered her with a tarp to avoid detection. Felix then drove his pickup truck while Lewis took the wheel of KLA's car, and they headed to the bridge over the San Jose Lagoon. Ensuring no one was around, they threw KLA, still alive, into the water. To eliminate any chance of survival, they fired several shots at her. The next day, KLA's co-workers were alarmed when she didn't show up at the Veterinary Medicine and Aesthetics Center. Known for her responsibility, KLA would never miss work without notifying anyone. Unable to reach her by phone, they contacted her sister, Bears. After multiple failed attempts to reach KLA, Bears went to her house. Using a spare key, she entered and found only the hungry animals, which had been unfit for almost 24 hours. Realizing something terrible had happened, Bears called their mother and then the police, reporting her suspicions and the threats against her sister. She also called Felix, who claimed he had spent the previous evening and night at home with his family. KLA's mother took the first flight from Florida to San Juan, fearing that Felix might have taken KLA to a private clinic for an abortion without her consent. She couldn't bear to think that KLA might be dead. The initial investigation involved questioning neighbors and coworkers, but they hadn't noticed anything unusual. Simultaneously, messages about KLA's disappearance were posted on social media, asking anyone with information to come forward. The case quickly gained widespread attention, especially when it became known that the missing girl had been in a long-term relationship with a famous athlete. The combination of public interest and the high-profile nature of the case led to increased scrutiny. Law enforcement officials intensified their efforts, interviewing more individuals and piecing together the events leading up to KLA's disappearance. Felix's involvement, despite his initial denials, became more suspicious with each passing day. The once promising athlete's downfall was now inexorably linked to the tragic fate of KLA Rodriguez. And public figures attended the funeral, turning it into a significant event that highlighted the issue of gender violence. Reporters were eager to interview any member of Rodriguez's family who did not hold back their suspicions and blamed Felix for the incident. On April 30th, KLA's car was found abandoned on the east side of the city, with her documents and personal belongings inside. There were no signs of struggle, giving a faint hope of finding her alive. However, on May 1st, a passerby saw a strange shape resembling a human body in the shallow waters of the San Jose Lagoon. The police soon recovered the body of a young woman believed to be KLA. The Rodriguez family, who arrived to identify the body, held on to hope until the last moment, but their hopes were shattered when they recognized KLA by a distinctive tattoo on her arm. News of the gruesome discovery caused public outrage, leading to spontaneous rallies demanding justice. On the same day, Felix was detained and taken in for questioning. Despite his categorical denial of involvement and his claim that he was at home with his family on the night of KLA's disappearance, Felix was released as there was initially no concrete evidence to charge him. One of the key witnesses was Felix's legal wife, who admitted during the first interrogation that she was aware of his affair with KLA, but only learned about the pregnancy then. Furthermore, she did not confirm Felix's alibi, stating he was not at home on the night of the murder. Investigators checked traffic surveillance footage and discovered Felix's pickup truck and KLA's car traveling together on the way to the bridge. KLA's car was clearly not driven by her. On the same day, Felix's car was seized for examination, and they found hair belonging to KLA in the vehicle. Lewis, the accomplice, surrendered to the police, promising to tell the whole truth in exchange for a reduced sentence. Felix was taken into custody again, but he refused to cooperate, denied his guilt, and did not answer questions despite the mounting evidence. A firearm registered to Felix, which he used to shoot KLA from the bridge, was seized. Additionally, cell phone records confirmed that Felix, Lewis, and KLA were at the same location on the night of the murder. KLA's final farewell took place on May 8th, and the funeral was broadcast nationwide, serving as a call for justice and a reminder of the issue of gender violence. Her coffin was brought to the cemetery in a white carriage, over which white flower petals were thrown from the air. Many notable Puerto Rican figures, including celebrities and athletes, attended the funeral, turning it into a poignant and powerful event that demanded accountability and sought to raise awareness about violence against women. Politicians and public figures have spoken out about the high-profile incident. Felix Verdejo was charged with carjacking, kidnapping, premeditated murder, and the murder of an unborn child. These charges collectively carry the potential for the death penalty. However, the relatives of the deceased requested life imprisonment instead, so that Felix would suffer in captivity for the rest of his life. The trial faced repeated delays due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but was eventually held virtually in the spring of 2021. The court determined that the crime was committed by a group with prior conspiracy and particular cruelty against a pregnant woman. The reconstruction of the crime was largely possible due to the testimony of Lewis, who admitted his guilt and detailed his role in obtaining the drug, the wire, and the concrete block at Felix's request. Felix, however, continued to deny his involvement, though his denial did not affect the outcome. Felix's wife, who testified in court, filed for divorce almost immediately after his arrest and distanced herself from the case, focusing on her business and raising their young daughter. Reports indicate that Eliza Santiago has since remarried. She admitted in an interview to receiving anonymous death threats and messages, with many suspecting her as the crime's orchestrator, though no evidence supported this claim. In the summer of 2023, the jury, having reviewed all the evidence and testimonies, was ready to announce the verdict. Felix Verdejo and his accomplice, Luis Cadiz, were found guilty on all charges. Despite the guilty verdict, the killers have not yet been sentenced. The next court hearing is scheduled for mid-November 2023, where it is likely both men will receive life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, ensuring they remain in prison for the rest of their lives. Politicians and public figures have spoken out about the high-profile incident involving Felix Verdejo. He was charged with carjacking, kidnapping, premeditated murder, and the murder of an unborn child. These charges collectively carried the possibility of the death penalty. However, the relatives of the deceased requested that the court sentence him to life imprisonment so that he would suffer in captivity for the rest of his life. The trial faced repeated delays due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but was eventually held virtually in the spring of 2021. The court determined that the crime was committed by a group of individuals who had conspired beforehand and had acted with particular cruelty against a pregnant woman. The reconstruction of the crime was largely made possible by the testimony of Lewis, who admitted his guilt. He detailed his role in obtaining the drug for the injection, as well as the wire and concrete block used to dispose of the body at Felix's request. Despite this, Felix continued to deny his involvement, although his denials had little impact on the outcome of the case. Felix's wife, who testified in court, filed for divorce almost immediately after his arrest. She tried to distance herself from the case, focusing on her business and raising their young daughter. According to reports, Eliza Santiago has since remarried. She admitted in an interview that she received anonymous death threats and messages wishing harm upon her and her daughter Miranda. Many people suspected her of being involved in the crime, but no evidence supported this claim. In the summer of 2023, the jury, having reviewed all the evidence and testimonies, was ready to announce its verdict. Felix Verdejo and his accomplice, Luis Cadiz, were found guilty on all charges. Despite the guilty verdict, the sentencing had not yet been carried out. The next court hearing was scheduled for mid-November 2023. It is expected that both men will receive life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, ensuring they remain in prison for the rest of their lives. The public's reaction to the case has been one of outrage and demand for justice. The murder of Kayla Rodriguez and her unborn child has sparked widespread discussions about gender violence and the protection of women. The case has also drawn attention to the potential for abuse of power and influence by celebrities. The trial and its proceedings have been closely followed by the media, keeping the issue in the public eye and maintaining pressure on the legal system to deliver a just outcome. As the sentencing date approaches, the families of the victims, along with supporters and advocates for justice, continue to call for the maximum penalty. They hope that the verdict will serve as a deterrent to others who might think they can commit similar crimes and escape justice. The tragic story of Kayla Rodriguez has not only affected her immediate family, but has also resonated with many people across Puerto Rico and beyond, highlighting the need for systemic changes to protect vulnerable individuals from violence and abuse. The anticipation surrounding the sentencing of Félix Verdejo and Luis Cádiz has reached a fever pitch. The public's demand for justice is louder than ever, as rallies and demonstrations continue to be held, emphasizing the need for accountability and reform. Advocacy groups have seized the moment to push for stronger laws protecting women and harsher penalties for gender-based violence. As the date for the sentencing approaches, Félix's former wife, Elisa Santiago, remains under intense scrutiny. Despite her efforts to distance herself from the crime, public suspicion has not entirely dissipated. She maintains her innocence and focuses on rebuilding her life, but the shadow of the case looms large. Her remarriage and attempts to move on are met with mixed reactions, as some sympathize with her plight while others remain skeptical. On the other hand, Kayla Rodriguez's family continues to grapple with their loss. They have become vocal advocates against domestic violence, hoping to turn their tragedy into a catalyst for change. Their heartbreak has been compounded by the slow pace of justice, but they remain resolute in their fight for Kayla's memory. Her sister, Barized, has been particularly active, giving interviews and participating in public forums to raise awareness about the dangers of abusive relationships and the importance of early intervention. The trial has also put a spotlight on the systemic issues within the legal and criminal justice system. Critics argue that the delays and initial mishandling of the investigation reflect broader problems that need to be addressed. Calls for police reform and better support for victims of domestic abuse have gained momentum, with legislators promising to introduce new measures to ensure that such cases are handled more effectively in the future. As the legal proceedings continue, the case remains a significant point of discussion in Puerto Rico and beyond. Media coverage has been relentless, with updates on every development, keeping the story alive in the public consciousness. The outcome of the trial is seen as a litmus test for the justice system's ability to hold powerful individuals accountable for their actions. On the evening of February 23, 2019, a young woman named Jessie Correa left a party with her friends. They had enjoyed themselves and departed in a car, but Jessie stayed behind to catch another ride home. Unfortunately, it seems she got into the wrong car by mistake, leading to a dispute with the driver. This argument caught the attention of a nearby man. Shortly after, Jessie left with this man, and that was the last time she was seen alive. 5 days later, police stopped a car displaying suspicious signs. What they discovered inside would haunt them forever. Jessie Correa had been eagerly anticipating her 23rd birthday celebration at a popular entertainment venue in Boston. The night, meant to be filled with joy and laughter, took a tragic turn when Jessie never made it back home. Her alarming disappearance quickly became a major news story, covered extensively by numerous American TV channels. Jessie Correa had a life story far from a fairy tale. A year before these events, she had suffered a violent attack from the father of her daughter Gabriela, named Miguel Castro. Despite her efforts to leave him, Castro's aggression escalated, resulting in a severe beating. This incident led Jessie to seek police intervention, which culminated in Castro's conviction and a 4-year prison sentence. Professionally, Jessie was a dedicated waitress at Del Frisco's, a renowned restaurant in Boston. Her passions included dancing and photography, and she cherished every moment spent with her family, friends, and especially her daughter. She loved outings to the park with Gabriella, creating memories now tinged with sadness. On the evening of February 23, 2019, Jessie, dressed in a new orange jumpsuit, left her 2-year-old daughter with family to celebrate her birthday. The chosen venue was a vibrant nightclub in Boston's Theater District on Warren Street. According to a friend, the night was spent joyfully dancing and enjoying champagne. After the club closed, Jessie and 2 friends emerged into the night, but they parted ways, leaving Jessie alone. That was the last time she was seen. Attempts to contact her were futile as her phone went straight to voicemail. For 2 agonizing days, there was no news of Jessie. Her worried family had no idea of her whereabouts since that fateful Sunday morning. On February 26, her father, Joaquim Correa, along with a friend, approached the police to report Jessie's mysterious disappearance. The police launched a full-scale investigation, beginning with tracing her steps post-nightclub. Flyers were distributed across the city, imploring the public for any information. Despite interviewing her friends who were with her that night, the investigation hit a roadblock. None knew where she had gone after leaving the venue. Their farewell that night was their last interaction with Jessie. In their meticulous investigation into Jessie Correa's disappearance, the police scrutinized witness accounts and analyzed CCTV footage from both the nightclub and the surrounding streets. A critical piece of footage from Tront Street, captured at 2:14 a.m., revealed Jessie outside the nightclub engaging with several individuals. After leaving the club, the video showed a visibly inebriated Jessie mistakenly entering an Uber she hadn't ordered, leading to a heated argument with the driver, who subsequently forced her out of the vehicle. The situation escalated as Jessie continued to argue with the Uber driver. It was then that an unknown man approached her, seemingly offering assistance. The footage captured a disturbing interaction. The man holding onto Jessie's hands appeared to be restraining her, despite her attempts to leave. The CCTV then recorded the chilling moment Jessie was coerced into leaving the area with this stranger. The gravity of the situation became apparent. Jessie had unknowingly encountered a predator. Further video evidence showed a haunting scene. Jessie, in an attempt to lighten the mood, climbed onto the man's back. He then carried her to his vehicle and they drove off together, disappearing from the camera's view merely 14 minutes later. Faced with these harrowing images, the police were tasked with unraveling numerous unanswered questions. The identity of this mysterious man and his intentions were paramount. The pressing question remained: where had he taken Jessie? The investigation intensified as the police sought to piece together the events of that fateful night, hoping to uncover the truth behind Jessie's disappearance. A breakthrough in Jessie Correa's case came swiftly. As the police identified the man seen with Jessie Correa, they found him to be 32-year-old Louis Coleman. Coming from a well-regarded family and reportedly holding a master's degree in physics, Coleman had no prior run-ins with the law. Interestingly, police records showed no vehicle registered to Coleman. However, it was discovered that his mother, a resident of California, owned a red 2016 Buick, the same type of car seen in the CCTV footage. Coleman's residence was located in Providence, Rhode Island, approximately 50 miles from the nightclub in Boston where Jessie was last seen. When the police arrived at Coleman's home in Providence, they found it empty. Surveillance cameras in and around his apartment complex provided grim confirmation of the investigators and Jessie's family's worst fears. The journey from the nightclub to Coleman's apartment typically took an hour. However, the timeline of events indicated that Coleman must have made a stop along the way, as he only reached his apartment around 4:15 a.m. on Sunday, roughly 2 hours after he was seen leaving with Jessie. Intriguingly, the following day, Coleman sent an email to his colleagues, citing illness as the reason for his absence and stating his intention to return in a few days. "Hey all, just giving everyone a heads up that I'm still out sick. I'll be back in a few days," he wrote. This communication raised suspicions that Coleman was buying time to conceal evidence of the crime, a theory that gained traction as investigators pieced together his actions over the subsequent 2 days. The police investigation into Jessie Correa's disappearance unearthed a series of chilling CCTV footage, shedding light on the tragic events following her encounter with Louis Coleman. Special Agent Thomas Zukowski described a key piece of footage showing Coleman carrying a motionless woman with long hair and orange pants, believed to be Jesse, into his apartment building around 4:27 a.m. This raised immediate concern, as Jesse appeared either unconscious or worse. On February 26, the day Jesse's father reported her missing, Coleman was spotted at a Walmart purchasing items that later seemed incriminating: Tyvek suits, duct tape, candles, electrical tape, a mask, surgical gloves, safety goggles, a respirator, bleach, and more. His actions suggested a desperate attempt to cover up a heinous act. The next day, while Jesse's loved ones distributed missing person flyers, Coleman returned to Walmart, this time buying a large suitcase and a canister. Later that evening, CCTV footage captured him entering his apartment with the new suitcase and then, in the early hours of February 28th, wheeling it out to his car. The footage was harrowing, showing Coleman struggling to load the heavy suitcase into the trunk. U.S. Attorney for Massachusetts Andrew Lelling later confirmed that since the morning of February 24th, Jesse Correa had not left Coleman's apartment. The police, armed with a search warrant, found incriminating items in Coleman's apartment and a nearby dumpster, including stained jeans, hooded coveralls, and items purchased from Walmart. On February 28th, when the police stopped Coleman near Wilmington, Delaware, they made a grim discovery in the trunk of his car. Jesse's body, concealed in a sofa cushion cover and a black trash bag inside the suitcase. Forensic examination revealed she had suffered strangulation and blunt force trauma, and there was evidence linking Coleman to the crime through DNA analysis. The tragedy of Jesse's untimely death was compounded by the loss experienced by her 2-year-old daughter. Boston authorities, visiting the Correa family, pledged to seek justice for Jesse. Amidst this, some social media users questioned Jesse's decision to be out alone at night. However, Suffolk District Attorney Rachel Rollins emphasized that the focus should not be on victim blaming, but rather on addressing the underlying issues of violence against women. Rollins urged a shift in societal conversation, calling for men to take responsibility and actively combat violence against women in all spheres of life. Lewis Coleman faced grave charges of kidnapping, resulting in death, a crime carrying the potential for either the death penalty or life imprisonment. However, in November 2019, prosecutors decided against seeking the death penalty, setting the stage for a trial steeped in complex evidence and emotional testimony. During the trial, prosecutors laid out a compelling case, presenting a range of evidence, including a disturbing video of Coleman dragging Jesse Correa's body into his Providence apartment. The prosecution also highlighted Coleman's unsettling online searches post-abduction, which included queries about fitting a body into a suitcase and extracting a tooth. Coleman's defense team, led by attorney David Hoos, challenged the relevance of this evidence to the kidnapping charge, arguing that the focus should be on the specific elements of the kidnapping allegation rather than Coleman's actions following Correa's death. The trial revealed a nuanced narrative of the events leading up to Jesse's tragic demise, with prosecutors establishing that Coleman was present in the same nightclub. As Jesse and her friends were at the nightclub, Coleman interacted with another woman, not Jesse, even exchanging phone numbers and texts with her. However, the situation took a grim turn when, according to prosecutors, Coleman misled Jesse into believing he would drive her to her friend's apartment, ultimately leading to her death. In stark contrast, the defense portrayed Jesse as the aggressor, suggesting that an impromptu fight between her and Coleman led to the fatal altercation. They argued that this was not a premeditated crime, despite the prosecution's assertion that Coleman, significantly larger than Jesse, was unlikely to be overpowered by her. Adding complexity to the defense's narrative were toxicology reports showing the presence of alcohol and prohibited substances in Jesse's system. Despite these claims, the jury found Coleman guilty of kidnapping resulting in death in June 2022. In October 2022, the court sentenced 36-year-old Lewis Coleman to life imprisonment without parole and ordered him to pay approximately $660,000 in compensation to Jesse's family. First Assistant United States Attorney Joshua Levy, in a poignant statement, underscored the irreversible harm and suffering inflicted by Coleman on Jesse and her family. Levy emphasized Coleman's lack of remorse and his elaborate efforts to conceal his heinous crime. The sentence, while unable to alleviate the enduring pain of Jesse's family, marked a conclusion to a case that had deeply impacted the community. The unanswered question of Coleman's intentions with Jesse's body lingered, a haunting reminder of the tragedy that befell a young mother and the shadow it cast on those she left behind. On the morning of Saturday, March 9, 2019, a solemn gathering filled St. Peter's Parish in Dorchester, uniting in grief to bid farewell to Jessie Correa. The air was heavy with sorrow as family, friends, and members of the community assembled to honor her memory. Some attendees chose to wear all white as a symbol of mourning, while others donned buttons, shirts, and sweatshirts adorned with Jessie's image and the poignant slogan, "Justice for Jessie." During the ceremony, Jessie's cousin and best friend, Maka DeAndrea, shared heartfelt words expressing both the deep sadness and the firm belief that Jessie's untimely passing was not meaningless. "We may not understand why, but God knows. I trust with all my heart that her death was not in vain," DeAndrea conveyed with emotion. Boston Mayor Marty Walsh, in his eulogy, reflected on the tragedy and committed to striving for a safer world for women. Young women should be able to celebrate their birthdays without fear and return safely to their children and families, Walsh asserted, empathizing with the unimaginable pain Jessie's family endured. Jessie's father, Joaquim Correa, addressed the congregation of over 200 people, expressing gratitude for the overwhelming support from the city and the tireless efforts of law enforcement across 3 states. Among the attendees was Jessie's mother, who had not seen her daughter in 20 years and had traveled from Portugal, embodying the far-reaching impact of the tragedy. The church was filled to capacity, with many people standing along the back wall, a testament to the love and respect held for Jessie. In his final tribute, Joaquim Correa's words echoed with both sorrow and love. "Rest in paradise, my dear Jessie. Rest in peace." The community's response to Jessie Correa's tragic death was profound, highlighting the need for greater awareness and action against violence. In the days and weeks following her funeral, vigils and memorials were held throughout Boston, with people from all walks of life coming together to honor her memory and stand in solidarity with her family. The case became a rallying point for discussions on women's safety and the need for stronger protective measures. Advocates and local leaders called for increased resources for domestic violence prevention and victim support services. Jessie's story was seen as a stark reminder of the vulnerabilities faced by women, particularly when alone at night. Organizations dedicated to combating violence against women used the incident to amplify their message, advocating for systemic changes to prevent such tragedies in the future. In response to the community's outcry, city officials announced plans to implement additional safety measures in nightlife areas, including improved lighting and increased police presence. There were also calls for better training for ride-sharing drivers and stricter regulations to ensure passenger safety. The tragedy prompted a broader conversation about the responsibility of businesses and the community in safeguarding individuals, especially women, in public spaces. Jessie's family, while devastated by their loss, expressed a deep commitment to ensuring that her death would lead to positive change. They established a foundation in her name, aimed at supporting survivors of violence and promoting awareness around the issues Jessie faced. The foundation's efforts included educational programs, community outreach, and partnerships with local shelters and support groups. Jessie's mother, despite the long years of separation, became actively involved, finding a sense of purpose in helping others through her daughter's legacy. The legal proceedings continued to draw significant public attention. Lewis Coleman's appeal processes and subsequent hearings were closely followed by the media and the community. The case highlighted critical issues within the criminal justice system, including the handling of domestic violence cases and the treatment of defendants in high-profile trials. Throughout this period, Jessie's family and friends remained a visible presence, attending court sessions and participating in public events. They became advocates for change, sharing Jessie's story to raise awareness about the dangers women face and the importance of community vigilance. Their resilience and advocacy were met with widespread support, as many recognized the courage it took to turn their grief into a force for good. In the years following the trial, Jessie's story continued to resonate. It served as a cautionary tale and a call to action, inspiring initiatives aimed at protecting vulnerable individuals. Educational institutions incorporated discussions about personal safety and consent into their programs, and public campaigns were launched to encourage bystander intervention and support for those in distress. Jessie Korea's legacy, though born from tragedy, became a symbol of hope and change. Her story underscored the importance of community solidarity, the need for systemic reform, and the power of advocacy in preventing violence and supporting survivors. As the community healed, they carried forward the lessons learned from Jessie's life and death, determined to create a safer and more compassionate society. The impact of Jessie Korea's tragic death extended beyond her immediate community, sparking a nationwide dialogue on issues of safety, gender violence, and justice. As media coverage of the case spread, so did public awareness and concern. National organizations focused on women's rights and safety rallied to support Jessie's family and used her story as a platform to advocate for broader systemic changes. In response to the outpouring of support and calls for action, lawmakers began to take notice. Proposals for new legislation aimed at improving safety for women in public spaces gained traction. This included measures to enhance security protocols in ride-sharing services, such as mandatory background checks for drivers, panic buttons for passengers, and more stringent verification processes. The aim was to create safer environments for women and ensure that incidents like Jessie's could be prevented in the future. The foundation established in Jessie's memory, named the Jessie Korea Foundation for Women's Safety, became a focal point for these efforts. The foundation's mission was to support survivors of violence, advocate for stronger protective laws, and promote educational programs on safety and empowerment. Through fundraising events, partnerships with local businesses, and public awareness campaigns, the foundation worked tirelessly to keep Jessie's memory alive and prevent similar tragedies. Jessie's story also highlighted the critical role of mental health support in the aftermath of trauma. The foundation collaborated with mental health professionals to offer counseling services to victims of violence and their families, recognizing the profound emotional and psychological impact such experiences can have. They provided resources and workshops on coping strategies, resilience building, and community healing, helping individuals and families navigate their grief and recovery. The annual Justice for Jessie March became a significant event, drawing participants from across the state and beyond. It served as a powerful reminder of the ongoing fight against gender-based violence and the importance of community solidarity. Each year, the march brought together survivors, advocates, law enforcement, and policymakers, fostering a space for dialogue, education, and action. The march not only honored Jessie's memory, but also advocated for continued vigilance and proactive measures to protect women. Educational institutions played a crucial role in perpetuating Jessie's legacy. Schools and universities incorporated discussions about consent, healthy relationships, and bystander intervention into their curricula. Programs aimed at empowering young women and educating young men about respect and responsibility became more widespread. These efforts were seen as essential steps in changing societal attitudes and preventing violence before it occurs. Jessie's family, despite their profound loss, became prominent advocates for change. They shared their story widely, speaking at events, participating in interviews, and working closely with the foundation. Their courage and dedication inspired many, highlighting the power of personal stories in driving social change. They emphasized that Jessie's death, while a devastating loss, should not be in vain, and that her story could be a catalyst for a safer and more just society. The case also brought to light the importance of law enforcement training in handling cases of gender violence and the need for a compassionate, victim-centered approach. Police departments across the region reviewed their policies and procedures, implementing training programs to better equip officers in dealing with such sensitive situations. This included training on trauma-informed practices, cultural competence, and the importance of maintaining a supportive and non-judgmental stance towards victims. As the years passed, Jessie's legacy continued to influence and inspire. Her story became a touchstone for discussions about safety, justice, and the need for societal change. The foundation's work expanded, reaching more communities and providing crucial support to those affected by violence. Jessie Korea, through her memory and the actions of those she left behind, became a symbol of resilience, hope, and the enduring fight for a world where women can live free from fear and violence. My dear child, the community's presence and solidarity served as a powerful reminder of Gus's life and the collective mourning of a life taken too soon. On October 16, 2022, at around 1:00 p.m., emergency services received a call from an Apple Watch. The operator asked, 911, "What are you reporting?"
911, what are you reporting? Hello? What's going on there?
The caller, a woman, seemed very upset and was hard to hear. The dispatch team could pick up sounds of a struggle and banging in the background before the call abruptly ended. It seemed like the woman was trying to send a message by tapping buttons on the watch since she couldn't speak. The dispatcher reassured her, saying, "Just hold on. My partner is on the way to help you. Can you hear me? I won't hang up until help arrives." At first, it was tough to figure out where the woman was because she couldn't talk. But thanks to the location data from the Apple Watch, they were able to find her in a suburban neighborhood. The police were quickly dispatched to the address they identified. Fortunately, the Apple Watch was still connected to the call, allowing them to hear the sound of a police car arriving at a house on Rosberg Street Southeast. The police announced their presence loudly, saying, "Police Department, if you're inside, make yourself known." However, when they entered the house, it was empty. They found signs that something had gone wrong. The front door was wide open, and the garage was in disarray. Inside, they discovered the broken pieces of the Apple Watch that had called 911, but there was no sign of the woman. Shortly after, two young people showed up at the house. Crystal, a 22-year-old, and her 11-year-old brother claimed to be the children of the homeowner, a 44-year-old woman named Young. Crystal told the police that earlier that day, she, her mother, and her brother had gone to church, which was a regular Sunday routine for them. When they returned home, they saw their father's minivan in the driveway. This wasn't unusual, as her parents were going through a divorce, and their father typically visited once a week to take care of some things. Crystal explained that her mother had asked her to take her brother out of the house for a bit so the adults could talk privately. Just after 1:00 p.m., while they were driving back, Crystal received an automated emergency text from her mother's phone that included a map to their home. When they returned, however, the minivan and their mother were missing, and the police were outside waiting. The police quickly came to the conclusion that Minho, the father, had likely taken Young hostage. They issued a missing person alert throughout Thurston and Pierce counties and turned to social media to spread the word, hoping the community could help them find her. And other law enforcement agencies joined the effort to locate the light, blue Dodge Grand Caravan driven by Young. Sadly, the response was minimal at the time, so let's rewind for a moment and delve into the family's background to understand what led to this situation. Initially, the family appeared ordinary, but there were underlying complexities. Minho, the father, had a previous military background involving intelligence work. Some speculated that his past service might have contributed to his sensitivity and stress levels. Furthermore, Minho and Young's marriage was troubled. Reports indicated that Minho had a volatile temper, particularly towards his wife. Young had confided in others about Minho's repeated threats to harm her as their marriage deteriorated. Young had made the decision to leave them for the safety of herself and their children, unaware that these threats would soon turn into a frightening reality. It all began as a typical October Sunday for the kids and their mom. They returned home late that morning to find Minho inside. After exchanging greetings, Young asked Crystal to take her younger brother outside for a while so she could speak privately with Minho about adult matters. Specifically, they needed to discuss their impending divorce and how to divide their finances. The details of how the situation escalated remain unclear, but the conversation quickly became heated. Young told Minho to leave because she couldn't handle the conflict anymore. However, as the argument intensified, Minho's anger grew. After storming out momentarily, he returned in a furious state. Finding Young upstairs in her bedroom trying to rest after the argument, Minho burst in and began attacking her. He repeatedly struck her in the head and violently threw her to the ground. Despite Young's efforts to defend herself, she was no match for Minho's strength, particularly given his military training. Minho continued his assault, threatening to end her life rather than share any of his retirement savings with her. To ensure she couldn't escape or call for help, Minho bound Young's hands behind her back with duct tape. He also tightly bound her ankles and thighs, rendering her completely immobile. To further restrict her movement, he taped over her mouth and eyes, leaving her unable to see or speak. After a while, Minho parked his van outside and returned to the house. During this brief absence, Young managed to partially free one hand and used her Apple Watch to send emergency texts to her children and call 911. Minho then dragged Young down the stairs and across the floor, which caused muffled screams, thuds, and struggles heard during the call to 911. Being skilled in intelligence, Minho noticed the smartwatch on her wrist and, unwilling to take any risks, grabbed a hammer and smashed both the watch and her wrists until it came off. Unbeknownst to him, the watch continued to function and lay on the garage floor, aiding the police in locating the house. After forcing Young into the trunk of his van, Minho drove away swiftly, passing a police vehicle. Inside the trunk, Young was blindfolded, gagged, and tightly bound. Despite these harrowing circumstances, she attempted to open the trunk door with her toes during the terrifying drive. Unfortunately, her efforts were futile due to her restraints and inability to see. As the suburban landscape gave way to a dense, lush forest, Minho's madness persisted. Abruptly stopping in a clearing, he dragged Young out, threw her to the ground, and retrieved the shovel from the van. Young could only stifle her cries as Minho began digging a hole nearby, clearly intending to bury her alive. After digging for some time, he cruelly stabbed Young in the chest with a long, thin knife. He then tossed her into the shallow pit and callously added insult to injury by throwing a heavy log on top of her, declaring that she would die there. Despite everything, Young managed to move her head slightly to create a small air pocket to breathe. Unnoticed by Minho, he continued to pile dirt over her and left, believing she would suffocate and perish beneath the earth from her injuries. However, the hole Minho dug wasn't deep enough to suffocate Young. It was only 19 inches deep. Despite the weight of the wood and dirt immobilizing her, she managed to remain alive for about 19 hours. Young lay in the shallow grave, determined to survive and escape. Eventually, she found a way to loosen the wrist restraints and began digging herself out. First, she freed her hands, then pushed the dirt away from her body and head. After a tremendous effort, she finally freed herself from the grave and tore off the duct tape from her eyes. Initially disoriented and thinking she had been abandoned in the forest, Young was surprised to see Minho's minivan still parked nearby the hole. Fueled by adrenaline, she pushed the heavy log off herself, ran as fast as she could, and escaped back to the police and her family. They were deeply concerned for Young's safety and meticulously examined every piece of evidence. The most compelling evidence came from numerous CCTV recordings from neighborhood doors and streets. One camera captured a man in a white t-shirt and dark shorts entering Young's garage, followed shortly by a minivan speeding away from the house, passing a police SUV, and heading south. Despite their intensive search efforts that day, the police found no trace of Young. However, around 1:00 a.m. the following morning, residents on Stemmen Road, about 6 miles from Young's home, reported hearing noises and suspected someone was on their property. Police responded quickly and, using their headlights, spotted a figure crouching behind a shed in the front yard. The figure was soon identified as Hannah, recognized from the Endangered Missing Persons Alert. She was dirty, extremely agitated, and covered in blood. When Young realized the approaching figures were police officers, she ran toward them, crying and shouting hysterically. She clung to the officer's arm, screaming that her husband was trying to kill her and pleading for protection. Young was immediately taken to the hospital, where medical professionals treated her injuries. Fortunately, Young's injuries were not life-threatening. The search for Minho, the prime suspect in her attempted murder, continued. The police received a tip the next morning around 7:00 a.m. about a suspicious vehicle parked along the Jolly's Western Trail. Upon arriving at the scene, they found Minho in the Dodge Grand Caravan. It appeared he was searching for Young, likely shocked to discover the grave empty. The police promptly arrested him. Minho faced serious charges including first-degree attempted murder, threats to kill, kidnapping, assault, and domestic abuse. Surprisingly, he pleaded not guilty to all charges except for domestic abuse. A preliminary hearing took place on October 19, 2022, in Tarrant County Superior Court. Young, unable to attend in person, sent a victim's advocate to read her statement. She urged the court to keep Minho in custody, expressing her fear for her safety and the trauma he had inflicted. Court Commissioner Nathan Crow found probable cause for the charges against Minho and decided against granting bail. Additionally, Crow ordered that Minho must not contact Young or any other witnesses. Despite this, Minho's public attorney requested a reduced bond of $150,000, arguing it would suffice for detention. The defense attorney also cited Minho's struggles with mental health issues, including post-traumatic stress disorder, homelessness, and isolation from family and friends, advocating for a more lenient sentence. In his final statement, Minho expressed remorse, stating, "If I could go back to that day, I would have gone into the house." Ironically, these were the same issues that had prompted Young to seek a divorce, though it did not excuse his actions, particularly the attempted murder that could have also traumatized their children. "I didn't think." Young recalled telling him to think about our children, to which he replied, "I don't mean anything today. I'm going to kill you." Before sentencing, Young addressed the court, saying, "Since that day, my children's and my lives have fallen apart. I'm left to live with the mental shock and health issues for the rest of my life." Recounting the traumatic memories of the incident, Young and the prosecution sought the maximum possible sentence for Minho after a thorough investigation. After a trial process, Minho eventually pleaded guilty to the charges nearly a year and a half following his arrest. On April 22, 2024, Tarrant County Superior Court handed down the verdict. According to court documents, Minho was convicted of one count of second-degree attempted murder and domestic abuse. During sentencing, the judge opted for the maximum sentence permissible under Washington State's guidelines. Judge Mary Sue Wilson remarked that the crimes committed by Minho were horrendous, emphasizing the physical pain and fear Young had endured, which were beyond words. She praised Young for her remarkable courage and expressed hope that she could focus on her emotional recovery and mental health treatment. Judge Wilson sentenced Minho to 13 years in prison, followed by 3 years of community custody. By the time he completes his sentence, Minho will be around 67 years old, hopefully too old to pose any further threat to Young or others. With Minho now behind bars for his actions and serving a lengthy sentence reflecting the severity of his crimes, this case concludes. It serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of domestic violence, while also highlighting Young's incredible strength and bravery. She navigated an unimaginable situation driven by her determination to protect her children and survive, which is truly inspiring. As we reflect on these events, we hope that Young and her children can find peace and healing after everything they've endured. Perhaps they can move forward into a safer and happier chapter of their lives. Meanwhile, Minho may use his time behind bars to deeply contemplate the consequences of his actions and the pain he has caused. Although the legal proceedings are over, this case sparks ongoing discussions about improving protections and support for those facing domestic violence. It underscores the importance of intervening early to prevent escalation and ensure victims receive the help they need. After a challenging trial process, Minho's plea of guilty nearly a year and a half after his arrest marked a significant moment in the pursuit of justice for Young. On April 22, 2024, the Tarrant County Superior Court rendered its verdict, convicting Minho on counts of second-degree attempted murder and domestic abuse based on the harrowing events that unfolded. During the sentencing phase, the judge's decision to impose the maximum allowable sentence under Washington State's guidelines underscored the severity of Minho's actions. Judge Mary Sue Wilson, in delivering the sentence, acknowledged the heinous nature of the crimes committed, recognizing the immeasurable physical and psychological trauma inflicted upon Young. She commended Young for her exceptional bravery throughout the ordeal and expressed hopes for her continued emotional healing and recovery. The court's decision mandated Minho serve 13 years in prison, followed by 3 years of community custody, ensuring he would be closely monitored upon release. Given the length of his sentence, Minho would be around 67 years old upon completing his term, potentially diminishing any threat he could pose to Young or others in the future. With Minho now incarcerated and justice served, the focus shifted to Young and her children's journey toward healing. The resilience and fortitude Young displayed amidst unimaginable circumstances serve as a testament to her unwavering commitment to protect her family and reclaim her life. Their story resonates as a beacon of hope and courage for survivors of domestic violence everywhere, illustrating the power of perseverance and community support in overcoming adversity. Looking ahead, the hope is that Young and her children can find solace and rebuild their lives, free from the shadows cast by Minho's actions. While the legal proceedings have reached their conclusion, the case continues to prompt critical conversations about enhancing protections and resources for individuals facing domestic violence. It serves as a poignant reminder of the urgent need for proactive measures to prevent such tragedies and ensure all victims receive the support and intervention they deserve. As the community reflects on this chapter,
There remains a collective resolve to advocate for policies and initiatives that promote safety, justice, and healing for survivors of domestic abuse. By amplifying awareness and fostering empathy, we strive to create a society where every individual feels empowered to seek help and break the cycle of violence. In closing, while the journey towards recovery may be ongoing for
Young and her family, their resilience and courage inspire us all to work towards a future where such stories of survival and triumph become more prevalent than those of suffering and injustice.